Everyone sees Luana Alonso as the beautiful Olympic swimmer, but few know the battles hidden behind her triumphs and medals. This is the untold story, the pain behind the glory. Luana Alonso was born in Asunción, Paraguay, a city alive with football chants and weekend gatherings, but one rarely associated with Olympic swimmers. Her story began not in the spotlight of international arenas, but in the quiet rhythms of a family that taught her the meaning of resilience. Her parents, Carlos and Maria, worked hard to provide for their 3 children, creating a home that may not have overflowed with material wealth, but was rich in love, discipline, and encouragement. Together with her older brother Diego and her younger sister Camila, Luana grew up in a household where family bonds were unshakable. Around the dinner table, there was laughter, teasing, and the occasional debate about school, chores, and dreams for the future. For Carlos and Maria, the message was always clear: nothing worth having came without effort. From the very beginning, Luana was different. Her family often joked that she was the one who could never sit still, a bundle of energy that needed an outlet. She ran through the streets with Diego, challenged Camila to endless games in the backyard, and turned every activity into a competition. Even in defeat, she refused to sulk for long. She would quietly replay what went wrong, then return the next day determined to win. That stubborn streak would later become one of her defining traits, but as a child, it was simply who she was: driven, restless, and unwilling to back down. Her introduction to the water wasn't through sport, but through play. Weekend trips to the pool with her parents were highlights of her childhood. While Diego preferred football and Camila liked to dance, Luana was always the first to dive in. She loved the way the water surrounded her, how it demanded both strength and calm. She experimented with holding her breath, racing to the other side, trying to outlast Diego in underwater challenges. The pool became her sanctuary, a place where her endless energy was not only accepted, but celebrated. Carlos noticed her natural rhythm and endurance, while Maria couldn't help but smile at the way her daughter's eyes lit up every time she swam. As she began training at local clubs, her potential became impossible to ignore. Coaches saw not just talent, but an instinct for the sport, the ability to anticipate movement and push herself beyond exhaustion without complaint. She wasn't the tallest or the strongest, but she was fearless. She had quick reflexes, endurance beyond her years, and an instinct for rhythm that set her apart. Unlike others who complained about long practices, Luana welcomed them, eager to test herself, to shave off seconds, to feel the burn in her muscles that told her she was improving. She was too young to put into words what it meant, but inside, she knew that the pool was where she belonged. Long before headlines and international competitions, before the Olympics became a possibility, there was simply a girl from Asunción, swimming because it made her feel alive. The city around her may not have been known for producing swimmers, but she carried a spark that didn't need history or facilities to ignite. She had her family's unwavering support, her own restless determination, and a love for the water that felt less like a choice and more like destiny. And though the world didn't yet know her name, Luana was already beginning to write a story that would carry far beyond the borders of Paraguay. But how did that playful passion turn into the discipline of a sport that would change her life? By the time Luana Alonso reached her teenage years, she had already separated herself from the pack in ways that no one in Paraguay could ignore. Swimming was still a niche sport in her country, overshadowed by football fields packed with boys dreaming of glory and stadiums alive with chants on weekends. Yet here was Luana, slicing through the water with a determination that made her impossible to overlook. She wasn't just winning races, she was breaking national records, rewriting what seemed possible for a Paraguayan swimmer. Each time her name appeared at the top of the results sheet, it carried a significance far beyond the stopwatch. For the first time, people were beginning to believe that their small nation could produce athletes who could compete against the world's best in the pool. But with those victories came sacrifices that most people never saw. While other teenagers spent afternoons at cafes or gathering with friends, Luana was in the water, lap after lap, under the watchful eyes of her coaches. Her mornings often began before dawn, when the streets of Asunción were still silent, and she would dive into a cold pool to begin her first training session of the day. Schoolwork came in fragments of time between practices, her notebooks often stained with chlorine as she studied late into the night. Social life was something she had to let go of, not because she didn't want it, but because her ambition demanded it. The pool consumed her hours, her energy, her youth. The weight of expectation only grew heavier as her times dropped. Paraguay was a country with almost no tradition in swimming, and suddenly, this teenage girl was the face of possibility. Reporters began to follow her story, national broadcasters ran highlights of her races, and her name became synonymous with hope for a new kind of sporting recognition. For Luana, it was thrilling and terrifying all at once. Every time she walked onto the deck of a competition, she knew she wasn't just representing herself. She was carrying the flag of a country that was hungry to be seen, desperate for a new hero. That flag, embroidered on her cap and swimsuit, became both a source of pride and a weight that forced her to grow up faster than most. Her first international competitions were a shock to the system. The pools were bigger, the crowds louder, and the athletes stronger and taller than anyone she had ever raced before. Standing on the starting blocks, she sometimes felt like a small fish in a vast ocean, dwarfed by competitors from powerhouse nations like the United States, Australia, and China. But those moments never broke her. If anything, they sharpened her edge. Every race abroad was another test, another reminder that to stand shoulder to shoulder with the best, she had to push herself harder than ever before. She didn't have the resources or the history behind her that her opponents did, but she had something else. The unshakable drive to prove that Paraguay belonged on the swimming map. The pressure came with costs. There were days when her body felt broken, when the repetition of training left her aching and exhausted. There were nights when the loneliness of the journey sank in, when she wondered if all the sacrifices were worth it. The spotlight, however small compared to global stars, still burned intensely back home, where every result was dissected, every performance tied to the question of national pride. For a teenager, it was a lot to carry. Yet Luana carried it anyway, fueled by the thought of the little girl who had once fallen in love with the water, and by the family who never let her forget why she began. Each record she set, each step onto an international stage, was not just a personal victory, it was a crack in the barrier that had kept Paraguay invisible in the swimming world. Luana wasn't just swimming for herself anymore. She was swimming for a country that finally dared to dream of something bigger. And though the weight of that responsibility often felt overwhelming, it also gave her purpose. The flag on her back wasn't just heavy, it was the fire that kept her moving forward, stroke after stroke, into waters no one from her homeland had ever dared to cross. But what happens when the pressure of being a pioneer collides with the vulnerability of being a teenager? The glow of success brought Luana Alonso into a world she had never fully prepared for. Her name began appearing in headlines, her face on posters, and her story was shared across television broadcasts and online platforms. For a country like Paraguay, not used to seeing one of its own shine in international swimming, Luana became more than an athlete. She became a symbol of hope, proof that even from a small nation with limited resources, greatness could emerge. Her social media following grew rapidly, filled with fans who admired her talent, her resilience, and the way she carried the flag on her back with such pride. Each competition she entered drew more attention, and with every new personal record, the spotlight on her life grew brighter. But while the outside world saw the achievements and the glamour, the reality behind the scenes was far more complicated. The training was relentless, grueling in a way that few outside her circle could understand. Early mornings were spent in the water, followed by hours in the gym, and then back to the pool again, each session designed to push her beyond exhaustion. Her body was constantly tested, leaving her sore and drained, yet there was no room for rest when international competitions loomed. The physical toll was immense, but it was the mental battles that left the deepest marks. Far from home, Luana often felt the weight of isolation pressing down on her. The nights in unfamiliar hotel rooms after long days of travel or competition were quiet, too quiet, filled with moments of doubt that she couldn't easily shake. Messages from family and friends back in Asunción helped, but they couldn't fill the emptiness of being away from the people who had grounded her since childhood. the laughter of her siblings, the reassuring presence of her parents, the comfort of being in her own home. These were things she missed most when the world expected her to stand tall on foreign stages. Balancing her commitments only added to the strain. School assignments piled up as training and travel consumed her schedule, forcing her into a constant juggling act. While her classmates had the luxury of focusing solely on their studies, Luana was splitting her time between textbooks and endless hours in the pool, often completing homework while her muscles still ached from practice. At times, she felt like she was living two separate lives, the disciplined athlete chasing excellence and the teenager who was still trying to keep up with her education. The pressure of public expectations was perhaps the heaviest burden of all. Every missed medal, every race where she finished short of the podium, felt amplified in the eyes of her supporters. For Luana, these moments didn't feel like personal shortcomings. They felt like she was letting an entire nation down. Paraguay had placed its hope on her shoulders, and while the praise after victories was intoxicating, the silence or disappointment after losses cut deep. Doubts crept in, whispering questions she couldn't ignore. Was she good enough? Was she strong enough to keep carrying this weight? The world celebrated her as a rising star, but within, she was often locked in battle with her own insecurities. Confidence didn't always come easy, especially when the margins between victory and defeat were measured in fractions of a second. The pool became both her sanctuary and her battlefield, a place where she could silence the noise but also confront her deepest fears. In the water, she felt powerful, unstoppable at times, but outside of it, she often struggled with the loneliness and pressure that came with being the face of a country's sporting dream. Yet, through it all, Luana never stopped showing up. No matter how heavy the spotlight or how sharp the doubts, she kept diving back into the water, pushing herself to go further. Every setback became fuel, every challenge a reason to fight harder. She knew that the struggles were part of the journey, as real as the medals and records. What the world didn't always see was the price behind the glory, the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the battles fought not just against opponents in the pool, but against the quiet voice in her own mind that questioned whether she could carry the weight of it all. But could she turn all the struggles into fuel for her biggest stage yet? The years of sacrifice began to bear fruit as Luana Alonso transformed from a promising young swimmer into a competitor who could stand shoulder to shoulder with the world's best. Every morning in the pool, every sore muscle, every moment of doubt had been building towards something bigger, but now the results started to show. She wasn't just lowering her own times, she was breaking records that had stood untouched in Paraguay for years. National championships became a stage where she redefined what was possible for swimmers in her country. And with each new milestone, the dream of something greater took shape. That dream became reality when she qualified for the Olympic Games. For a girl from Asuncion, a place with little swimming tradition, stepping onto the Olympic stage was more than an achievement. It was a revolution. Wearing Paraguay's colors in Tokyo, she carried with her not just the hope of a family, but the pride of an entire nation that rarely saw its flag represented in the pool. The Olympic Village, the cameras, the energy of competing alongside legends of the sport. It was overwhelming at times, but also electrifying. When she walked out for her race, heart pounding, she knew she wasn't just swimming for herself. She was swimming to prove that Paraguay belonged on this stage too. Her performance in Tokyo wasn't about medals, it was about presence, about showing that a swimmer from a small South American nation could compete on the world's greatest platform. For Luana, it was a victory of spirit, and it became one of the proudest moments of her young life. The world might have measured her success by the stopwatch, but for Paraguay, the moment she hit the water was already historic. The Olympics also changed her trajectory. Suddenly, she wasn't just a national athlete, she was an international representative of her country, invited to competitions across continents. She faced stronger fields, tougher opponents, and the pressure of proving that Tokyo was not the peak, but the beginning. Each race became a lesson, sharpening her instincts, strengthening her resolve. Along the way, there were highlights that reminded her why the grind was worth it. New personal bests, victories against seasoned swimmers, and podium finishes that drew applause from fans who were beginning to recognize her name. Her achievements extended beyond the water. Interviews, features, and recognition at home painted her as one of Paraguay's brightest sporting figures. Schools invited her to speak, and young swimmers who had never thought about competing suddenly saw a path because of her. Luana began to understand that her journey was bigger than her alone. It was a blueprint for those who would come after her. She wasn't just chasing times, she was building a legacy. Through it all, her family remained her anchor. Calls with her parents and siblings kept her grounded, reminding her of the girl from Asuncion who first fell in love with the water. Success hadn't changed her core, it had simply given her the chance to show the world the depth of her determination. From breaking records at home to competing on the Olympic stage, Luana's story became one of defying odds and rewriting expectations. What began as a little girl's passion in Paraguay had grown into a career marked by achievements that once seemed impossible. For her, the medals, the races, the victories, all of it was meaningful. But the true highlight wasn't a single result. It was the journey itself, and the knowledge that she had carved a place for herself and for her country in the history of swimming.